So on this feast of Saint Matthew, the Evangelist, I'm actually somewhat, kind of drawn this morning to the words of Psalm 105 that we prayed a little bit earlier, when it remembers when the Israelites remember their history, when they were few in number, of little account, and sojourners in the land, wandering from one nation to another, and from one kingdom to another. He let no one oppress them, and rebuked kings for their sake, saying, Do not touch my anointed, and do my prophets no harm. The story that we have from the story of Jesus's people is one in which, when they were most helpless, that's when God was most powerful in them and for them. When we were few in number, the psalm says, when basically we were completely defenseless, totally vulnerable, that's precisely when we were untouchable. And that's the reversal that God's grace brings up about in the power games of this world, that which is small is actually exceedingly great. And we remember in how Matthew offers us Jesus. In a sense, Matthew's gospel preaches Jesus, has the fulfillment of Israel's story, especially the story of the prophets, and that how the prophets were all pointing towards Jesus. And that, in a sense, Jesus culminates the history of Israel. Remember, Matthew starts out with that genealogy and wants to tie Jesus specifically into King David and to Abraham. So, so Jesus is the culmination of Israel's story, and especially that story about vulnerability, powerlessness, and weakness being made full of strength, revealing the glory of God's power. Do not touch my anointed, my Christ in the Greek. That would be the way the Greeks would hear this psalm. Do not touch my Christ. Do my prophets no harm. And that in the resurrection of Christ from the dead, God vindicated his promise that the anointed would not be touched. And in our joining with Jesus in baptism and our joining with him in solidarity with his own powerlessness, with his weakness, we also can trust, as Paul says, that that it is by faith that we are saved. It is by trusting in God's victory over death, in and through powerlessness, in and through suffering, that we are saved, that we are brought into life with God, right? That we are brought into membership in God's people. So let us remember that part of our story, that when we were few in number, and especially we as Christians in today's culture, whereas the prophet Isaiah says, don't call conspiracy what this people calls conspiracy. Don't fear what they fear. Don't dread what they dread. Especially in this time, we may feel that the voices of hope make us few in number, and that we are wandering from place to place. In a sense, we have no political home because, go figure, the Bible doesn't square with political platforms. But this is the time when God can especially work through us in the lives of all whom we know and love, that we can be a witness to God's saving power in us. We can be the messengers who bring good news.